Hello and thank you for tuning in. My name is Adam Sullivan and I live here in the Kenton area. Despite my cold, which I apologize for in advance, I'm very excited to share with you today my vision for an underappreciated and poorly utilized area of land in our community. Pictured here is an aerial image of a parcel of land found in Tonawanda. The area shown is located between Interstate 290, River Road, 2 Mile Creek Road, and the Youngman Expressway. It's surrounded by a residential community, industrial properties, and to the north you can see the Niagara River separating Tonawanda from Grand Island. And what I'd like to focus on for a few minutes is the area outlined in blue. This lot, 5565 River Road, is currently a privately owned lot of land that for more than 30 years was used as a toxic landfill. Fortunately, there doesn't appear to be any evidence that this activity has occurred for more than a decade. Also, for simplicity, moving forward, I'm going to refer to the River Road lot simply as the site. Now I've visited the site, and by all accounts, it has the appearance of a beautiful piece of undeveloped land. There's a strong population of tall wildgrass, trees are plentiful, other plants are plentiful, frogs are chirping in and around vernal pools. Mallards can be seen paddling along in any of the 3 creeks that run through the property. And in typical Western New York nature fashion, I also saw blue heron. Unfortunately, the area is actually very polluted as a result of the toxic waste that was dumped during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. The contaminants from the toxic waste seep into the soil over time, and this creates an ecological nightmare. For instance, plants form a mutualistic relationship with mycorrhizae, which is a fungus found in the soil. Plants provide this mycorrhizae with sugars that they create through photosynthesis, and in return, the mycorrhizae provide the plants with nutrients pulled up from the soil. Unfortunately, this also means that the toxicity found in the soil is making its way into the plant life. From the plant life, animals are going to feed on those plants, so the toxins from the pollution are now in the animals. Secondary consumers feed on many of those primary consuming animals, and toxins now in turn are in the secondary consumers. Tertiary consumers feed on the secondary, and so on. Now the toxins from the landfill are present and increasingly biomagnified as we travel up trophic levels of the interdependent food chains that constitute the local food web. And since many of these animals are motile, they're potentially coming into and out of the contaminated area, meaning that the pollutants are potentially heading outside of the contaminated area and settling into new habitats. But let's not forget about our waterways as well. Toxins in the soil travel by way of activity occurring within it, for example, by microorganisms and by water. Much of this area is wetland, meaning that nutrients, as well as toxins, found in the soil are essentially freely moving throughout the water and subsequently throughout the habitat. The pollutants make their way into the 3 creeks via surface runoff. Now these 3 creeks discharge into a larger 4th creek, Mile Creek, which in turn discharges into the Niagara River, which is only 2,500 feet away. Now, one of the really neat things about our waterways, especially our lotic waterways, is that nutrients within them swirl all around, up and down, and for the most part freely travel throughout the waterscape. Unfortunately here, this also applies to the pollutants. So once the contaminants from the site are in the Niagara River, they're going to make their way into both Lake Erie as well as Lake Ontario. The contaminants will also make their way through the aquatic food webs of these creeks, rivers, and Great Lakes in much the same manner as they do in terrestrial food webs. As a result of the toxic waste dumped here, the site has been designated by New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation as a Class 2 Superfund site. This means that the area poses a significant risk to the threat of the public or the environmental health, or both. Now the property is considered a brownfield, which is an area whose reuse may be challenging due to the hazardous contaminants present. No matter what development may or may not eventually occur on this property, it's clear that corrective action must be taken to detoxify the soil. Now what I would like to do is turn this brownfield into a green space. Before any determination is made on how to use the property, as I said, we've got to address the soil. So a course of action must be developed to detoxify the soil. I've got a few ideas on how to do this. We start by neutralizing the pH of the soil and bringing it within the 5 to 7 range. Next, we increase plant density at a reasonable rate to encourage new growth and increased production of detritus, which is decaying organic matter. Increasing population density will increase the frequency of reproduction of plants, and this increased frequency of reproduction is going to increase the rate at which the soil is detoxified. And we're going to apply fertilizer, fresh soil, phosphorus, fruit, and seed shells to promote new growth. I'd also like to see us plant trees along the areas of the site that line those 3 creeks. Riparian buffers like these have been found to reduce the rate of pollution, sedimentation, eutrophication, toxic contamination in our waterways. Lastly, while these corrective measures are occurring in a laboratory setting, we're going to experiment with the possibility of bioremediation or augmentation of the soil using fungi and prokaryotes. These organisms can assist in cleaning, so to speak, the soil, but to date, there's been no effective bioremedial relationship discovered for the contaminants found on this property. So I want to try and address that. Once the soil on these 37 acres is no longer contaminated at its current level and no longer poses its current health threat, development options can maybe be considered. And for me, this is where things get really exciting. You may notice a change to the aerial image that I showed earlier. Now, in addition to the blue border around the site, there's also a white border around much of the property surrounding the Superfund site. Each of these other parcels are owned by either the town of Tonawanda or the DEC. With that in mind, what I propose is a joint partnership between the town and the DEC to convert these 130 acres into a protected multiple-use habitat available to our community. The entire parcel of land, with the exception of that green square labeled A, is currently unused. That area is already established as a park, Tonawanda Fireman's Park, and it includes a playground, a dog park, and a shelter. The 2 properties labeled C are primarily undeveloped dirt, and the area labeled B is elevated by about 10 to 15 feet above area A, and it's a combination of dirt and grassland. As for D and E, I'm going to come back to them. Like I said, area A is already a park. The only change I'd like to see happen here is the addition of a recreational lacrosse field for our community's children. Our kids need to be more active, and lacrosse is a sport that's growing in popularity, especially in Western New York. Now, I'd like to also see a solar farm installed on area B. A solar farm of this size, which is roughly 6 acres, could generate around 1 megawatt of power. How this power will be used has not yet been determined, but for scale, 1 megawatt of power could adequately provide energy for up to 1,000 homes. Now, area C, that can serve as an entry point or an entranceway to areas A, D, and E. The 3 properties that make up areas D and E, they're almost entirely undeveloped. Our Superfund site, area D, it's a combination of forest, wetland, and open grassland. Each of these kinds of habitat are important, but wetlands especially so. Wetlands are among the most productive ecosystems in the world, on par with rainforests and coral reefs. Area E is almost entirely comprised of forest coverage. Again, creeks run through these parcels of land as well. What I'd like to do is see the town and the DEC invest in the purchase of the Superfund site. And then we'd be able to conserve nearly 100 acres as a wilderness area available for the use to the public, combining D and E. The only structural modification to the area would be the creation of a network of established pathways, some made of wood chips and others planked pathways along or suspended above the wetlands for hiking purposes. Conserving this land will not only stop further pollution from the toxins already in the soil, but it will also prevent any future pollution from commercial interests that may otherwise purchase the land and further damage it or degrade it. It's remarkable that such a large range of wilderness has remained relatively untouched despite its presence in an area we know has been heavily industrialized. Without question, this area should be conserved. We can enjoy the majesty of nature right here in our backyard today, and our children's children can enjoy it tomorrow. Take care of it. We have the opportunity to do something extraordinary and lasting, and I hope that you join in my vision for conserving this 130 acres. In closing, I'd like to part with a quote from Henry David Thoreau. We need the tonic of wildness. At the same time that we are earnest to explore and learn all things, we require that all things be mysterious and unexplorable, that land and sea be indefinitely wild, unsurveyed and unfathomed by us because unfathomable. We can never have enough nature.